for the agreement of a ceasefire. Representatives from the government and rebel groups are set to meet in Ethiopia to end weeks of ethnic bloodletting. CNN's Awa Damon has been following events on the ground inside South Sudan, and she files this report from the capital, Juba.
In Ethiopia's capital, with more individuals expected to be coming there throughout the day. Talks anticipated to begin possibly as soon as this evening or within the next few days. But these talks do not by any stretch of the imagination mean that there has been a cessation of violence on the ground here in South Sudan. The government declaring that state of emergency in two areas. The state of unity, that is where much of the country's oil resources are located, and also Jonglei state. Both of these areas are largely currently under rebel control. But the United Nations is warning that even if a ceasefire is implemented, that does not necessarily mean an end to this violence.
There has been killings and brutality, grave human rights violations and atrocities committed. We have seen evidence of apparent ethnic or targeting of South Sudanese citizens on ethnic grounds. This can lead to a perpetual cycle of violence that can destroy the fabric of the new nation.
At stake is the very identity of this young nation. The UN saying that the country right now is at a crossroads. So far, this conflict has cost at least 1,000 lives, 180,000 people internally displaced, and more than half of them have not made it to the safety of UN compounds. Grave concerns for their situation. It is believed that they are largely hiding out in the bush without access to food, clean water, or medical resources. Arwa Damon, CNN, Juba.
Vladimir Putin is vowing to tighten security across Russia ahead of the Winter Olympics. The Russian president was in Volgograd on Wednesday talking to survivors of the two terrorist attacks that left more than 30 people dead. Mr. Putin wants to reassure the world that his country is safe to host the Winter Olympics, which takes place in 36 days.
For Russian President Vladimir Putin, laying red roses on the site in Volgograd where a suicide bomber blew himself up on a trolley bus. One of two attacks in just 24 hours that killed 34 people. Then to the hospital to visit some of the 64 injured.
The abomination of this crime, or crimes that were committed here in Volgograd, does not need any additional commentary. No matter what motivated the criminals' actions, there is no justification for committing crimes against civilians, especially against women and children.
Putin is vowing complete annihilation of the terrorists and promising to beef up security across Russia. There's been no claim of responsibility yet. But suicide bombings are the hallmark of the Chechen terrorist dubbed Russia's Osama bin Laden, 49-year-old Doku Umarov. In March 2010, his female suicide bombers attacked the Moscow metro at rush hour, killing at least 40 people and injuring more than 100. Chechnya, once a war zone, has largely been pacified. But the terrorists have simply moved to neighboring Dagestan, 600 miles away from Sochi, where Russia will host the Winter Olympics in a little over a month.
Clearly at the Games, the opportunity to do an attack is going to be much, much tighter than any place else. So if they do an attack outside of Sochi, is it any less significant? Is that any less of a victory for the terrorists and less of a defeat for Putin? I would argue it's not.
A worrying trend, young Russians radicalized by Islamic extremists. Russian media reporting that the suspect in the Volgograd train station bombing is a medic, Pavel Pichanin, who reportedly became a Muslim in 2012 and moved to Dagestan. His distraught parents followed him there, but he disappeared. They recorded a video, his mother saying, Pavel, I'm appealing to you, please come home. We'll do anything, please come home. But Pavel answered in his own video posted on a terrorist website. I came here so that Allah would be pleased with me, so that I would deserve heaven, and you cannot deter me from this path. Putin won the support of many Russians because he's been able to crack down on terrorism. These attacks could undermine support for him at home and shake international confidence in his ability to protect the games. Jill Doherty, CNN, Washington.
There have been red-hot rhetorics from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. He welcomed the new year with new threats. CNN's Brian Todd tells us how analysts are interpreting his latest provocation.
He calls the U.S. and South Korea, quote, war maniacs, says those nations are deploying forces, girding for nuclear war with his country. And North Korea's menacing young leader, Kim Jong-un, delivers this warning for America.
Should another war break out on this land, it will result in a deadly nuclear catastrophe, and the United States will never be safe.
What are Western intelligence agencies interpreting in that rhetoric?
What they're seeing is that North Korea once again is blaming the U.S. and its allies for the high level of tensions on the Korean Peninsula rather than North Korean actions themselves. They're also threatening, as they have been for the past 6 to 9 months, that they already can hit the United States with a missile, perhaps nuclear tipped.
This is Kim Jong-un's first public speech since the execution of his uncle, Jang Song-taek, last month, and his first personal comments about it. Without mentioning the uncle by name, Kim called him part of a group of, quote, counter-revolutionary factionalists and said their removal unified North Korea. But the purge of Kim's uncle and others close to him signified huge internal upheaval.
The violence and publicity behind this takedown of the uncle, Jang Song-taek, will cause great fear among the elite in North Korea for the near future. But the next time Kim Jong-un starts to move, the general or the family member or the party leader who sees it coming may strike back first.
That may have been the case with Kim's uncle. South Korean officials and media said recently Jang Song-taek had control of lucrative fishing grounds. They said Kim wanted to take them back, hand them to the military. And a gun battle broke out between forces loyal to the uncle and North Korean soldiers. Kim was enraged when soldiers were killed in that battle, according to those reports, and moved against his uncle. It all signifies the dangerous, unpredictable nature of this young North Korean leader. In his New Year's message, Kim Jong-un said there should be improved relations between North and South Korea. But analysts say he's likely to launch another provocation soon. And if he does, South Korea's President Park Geun-hye is much more likely to retaliate than her predecessors were. Brian Todd, CNN, Washington.
We now take our second break. And before we take a leave of you, a quick reminder of the day's top stories. Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital has unveiled 5 top-of-the-range hemodialysis machines earmarked for the health sector by President Jammeh. Members of the National Assembly Select Committee on Government Projects have been inspecting ongoing road construction sites in the country. The government of South Sudan and rebel groups are set to meet in Ethiopia as part of efforts to end weeks of ethnic bloodletting in Africa's newest state. And barely a month before Russia hosts the Winter Olympics, President Vladimir Putin has vowed to tighten security as he visits survivors of the recent terrorist attacks in Volgograd. That was all in this edition of the news. Thanks for your time and do enjoy our range of interesting programs.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين بعد الله ميرلالو جوبرلالو البداودا